welcome back to this Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin, and we are doing an election recap of 2010. And with me are the two-party chairs in Idaho, Norm Semenko with the Republican Party and Keith Rourke with the Democratic Party. Thanks to both of you for being here. And we are going to take some phone calls. Let's hear from Kathy in Star. Kathy, go ahead, please.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My question is in regard to the amendments. And maybe I'm too close to my computer. No, okay. That were on the ballot, the four of them. Mm-hmm. How can, in the future, we better inform the public as to the implications of their vote, whether they vote yes or no on those?
What was your concern in particular?
That although it was described, briefly, what those would do, it gives the voter no information on the implications of those.
Okay, so you didn't get anything in the mail, because I know there was a big mailing that went out, like 600,000 pieces of mail or something like that on these.
And they were very brief, but none of them explained any implications, and I had not heard anything these amendments.
Well, you have to go back and watch, Kathy, you have to go back and watch Dialogue. We did a whole dialogue on 3 of those 4 amendments. I'm just teasing you there.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did. So you can go back on our website and check that dialogue out. Of course, the vote is over, so it doesn't really make much difference.
No.
But hold for a second, and we'll get an answer to your question.
Okay.
Norm, these were very complex amendments, and they held up the vote count in several areas. Do you think could have been something that could have been done better?
Well, they were complex, and there were 4 of them. I think folks have the opportunity to look at those things online on the internet if they're really interested. I think the summaries of them were fair. It was pretty evident what the amendments were going to do in terms of general proposition, and also there were advocates on either side. There was a fair amount of publicity around at least 2 or 3 of the 4 amendments.
Certainly the airport and the hospital ones,
yes.
But that's publicity. It's their point of view. They are just very complex to be on a ballot, but that happens a lot of times with constitutional amendments.
Personally, I didn't find them as complex as some other measures that we've seen, nor nearly as controversial as some of the measures that have been on the ballot.
The Secretary of State, this was a new thing to send out this much information, by the way. I talked to him about it, and he at first the office was not in support of it because they didn't know if they could have enough money to do it, but they were appropriated the money because the lawmakers felt it was important to get the information out.
Yeah, I have no criticism of the job that Ben's people did. I think there was a fair amount of information and other sources where it was available.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for calling, Kathy. Appreciate it. Let's go to Ken all the way up in Spirit Lake. Ken, go ahead, please.
Hello. I'm a Republican, but I'm kind of frustrated with the situation where, it's about my concern is about the stimulus money. I just heard that we're about ready to produce more money. My question is, looking at having a house and having finances, we know what our budget is. We know what we can spend and what we can't. In my position, I lost 25% of my wages. And so that should tell us that we need not to spend. We need to face tough times, tighten up the belt. And my question to you guys are, what is your opinion about that?
Okay, thank you very much. Stimulus will be definitely debated.
Well, I couldn't agree more with the caller. And by the way, I grew up in Spirit Lake, and we were just up there on the Republican bus tour, and 100 people came out in a town of 800. They are very concerned about the future of their country. This is exactly the message American voters sent to Barack Obama and to the Democrats in Washington was, stop the spending, stop the big government, get it under control. Let's have an adult conversation about how to get things back in balance.
But some of that original money started during the Bush era, did
Well,
it not?
It didn't start during the Bush years, but there's no doubt that Tea Party folks, for example, were upset not just with what Barack Obama and the Democrats are doing now to make it even worse, but what happened with the previous Republican administration and Republican voters as well.
Well, as a practical matter, this did start with the Bush administration, where they started 2 wars, both of which were deficit financed, and then proceeded with a large-scale series of tax cuts that also were deficit financed. if we are going to get our arms around a deficit problem, and I agree that there is one, we've got to recognize that the stimulus package, whether it works or it doesn't work, didn't start this particular round of deficit spending. And when you are already in a deficit, if you cut taxes at any level, then you are going to create a greater deficit. And if you want to do that, fine, but you can't very well complain about what the result is going to be.
Obviously, two philosophical differences. I need to ask you a question. Since Ken is from Spirit Lake, would folks in Spirit Lake be voting for Phil Hart and Athol? Would that be the same?
That is District 3, absolutely.
Would that be the same?
75% of folks did just that.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. We've got a graphic that shows that 75% of people voted for Phil Hart. In every other uncontested election, it was 100%. 25% of his constituents did not vote for him. This is a very contentious situation. I almost feel like asking the gentleman who called. Let's see, Ken, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm on the line still.
Did you vote for Phil Hart, if you don't mind my asking?
No, I did.
How come?
Because I believe, well, I didn't really get in contact with him. I was really debating on.
But you're aware of the ethics considerations, right? With
no, it wasn't.
Oh, okay. It didn't have to do with that. Okay, I'm gonna let you go. But 25% of his own constituents didn't even vote for him.
This is a very, very simple answer. We have a process for selecting our candidates. It's called the primary. Phil won the primary. There will be another primary in a year and a half, and if Republicans feel like they should have a different person carrying the flag, they'll select someone else. And I will also say that voters are fully capable of voting for someone else, and we certainly saw that in Alaska with a write-in pulling off the victory up there in the Senate race.
Let me interject a point here if I could. And I'm not chiding Norm's party for their enormous success. They're to be credited for that. But in many districts in the state, we have simply lost the two-party system. The voting pattern is such that Democrats cannot get elected.
So you don't put up any candidates against
candidates are not going to spend their time and their money and their efforts only to be rejected strictly on party labels. But what that means is when you have someone like Representative Hart, he can get away with things that no one should ever get away with. We all pay our taxes and we don't steal lumber from government land. But right now, in certain parts of the state, we don't have a two-party system. Canyon County is another example of how this can corrupt the entire process. I don't blame the Republicans for that. They have done one heck of a job. But I think Norm and I agree that the best system is a healthy two-party system.
Well, my feeling is that that's up to the folks that live in District 3 who they want to have representing them, and they have the power of the vote, and they don't want people in Boise or Sun Valley telling them who their representative should be.
Well, let's hear from somebody up north, Greg in Lewiston. Greg, go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I wanted to just comment and have the panelists comment again on the race between Tom Luna and Mr. Olson. And I watched the debate on television, and I really thought Mr. Olson just was much more intelligent, much more credible of a candidate, and I'm just shocked at the outcome. I'm an independent, by the way, and I've lived in Idaho for some time now, 15 years. I've seen, for better or worse, the products of the Idaho public school system, and I believe they have a long way to go. And it kind of goes to the idea of one-party rule in Idaho, and really, was this just a partisan vote? Does education and qualifications matter for positions in that particular?
And Greg, what do you do in Lewiston?
I'm a student.
You're a student in college?
Yeah, law student.
Okay, great. Let's put you on hold and get an answer to the question. Was it just a party vote?
You know, performance matters. And under Tom Luna, test scores have gone up. We're in the top echelon in terms of math achievement in the state. Tom is a smart, good, practical businessman, and he's also been on a school board in Nampa. He connected with the voters, he connected with parents, he connected with children. He's for choice in education. His message versus Olson's message was very clear. It was very distinct. I thought Olson did a very good job of explaining what he believed in, as did Tom, and the voters simply liked what Tom had to say better.
No, I don't agree with that at all. This was a partisan race and an embarrassment to the state, even given the one-party system that we've got. If this election had only involved parents of children now in schools, teachers, administrators, and school board members, no question about the fact that Stan Olson would be the new superintendent of public instruction. What happened here was that Tom Luna benefited from a tsunami wave of anti-administration voters, and they swept into office a lot of Republicans. This is one Republican who is not qualified, never was qualified, and has not done a good job.
Well, I just can't agree with that. You can say that your guy was a better candidate, but saying that Tom Luna, who's been doing this job very well for the last 4 years, is not qualified is just not something I can let pass.
Well, he's just not.
Well, Greg, you hear the differences in opinion there. Thanks so much for your call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And let's go to Mario in Boise. Mario, go ahead, please.
Hi, guys.
Good.
Good evening. I have a different understanding or analysis of why the Democrat lost and why the Republican lost. And first, I'm going to say that there's two messages here. One to Obama that he should hear more the people, and the second that many Republicans were fall down too from the Tea Party, and that's a message for the Republican guys that they better start crossing the aisle to negotiate and not to have a vacation on Congress. But my analysis of why the Democrats lost is because since the first day that Obama won the elections, the Republican Party started an active campaign of misinformation of anything that Obama did. Like in healthcare, you remember, they're going to kill my grandmother, you're going to insure the illegal immigrants, etc., etc. Imagine, Sarah Palin left her seat as the governor to go and campaign and misinform the American people. And when the spending occurred, the $780 billion that Obama put in the stimulus package, they started saying that it was excessive spending. And I say, which one was the excessive spending? The $780 billion that Mr. Bush and Cheney spent helping Iraqis, or the ones that Obama spent helping Americans? And they call it Obama the spender. But
Mario, which congressional district do you live in?
In 17.
Which congressional district? So that would be in 2?
I live by Leyta and
okay.
Alpine.
So you're in the 2nd district. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear the response. Hold, please. I'll start with you, Mr. Bork. Do you agree that a campaign of misinformation was started as soon as Obama became president that made it difficult for all Democrats?
Well, I don't. To call it a campaign of misinformation may be unduly harsh. I do think several Republican senators announced this, that if they could bring down Obama on health care, then they could make him a one-term president. Within 3 weeks of the election itself, this time, the minority leader of the Senate announced that the #1 priority of the Republican Party in the next 2 years would be seeing to it that Obama was a one-term president. I don't think those are healthy remarks. I don't think they reflect what most people expect Congress to do. And I'm not saying that all of the partisanship is on one side and none of it is on the other. But I do think that there has been an emphasis in these last 2 years on partisanship as a political tool rather than a legislative tool, and that represents a step backward.
There were also a lot of conspiracy theories out there.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
About Obama, about his ethnicity, about...
Well, let's get back to the point here, though.
Yeah,
I mean, Barack Obama is a personally very likable fellow. He had a 70% approval rating. What he is being judged on in this midterm election, what he has been judged on, and if he doesn't change things before 2012, what he will be judged on in 2012 are his policies. When you spend $787 billion promising and assuring the American people that the rate of unemployment will not go over 8%, and it goes to 10%, you start asking, what in the world are we doing?
What about
That's
Mario's
why the
point
Tea Party,
about all the spending on the wars?
Well, absolutely, that's something that's debatable. You can argue national security and what national security is worth spending money on all day.
Well, he was
but
saying
when you're spending $787 billion on a stimulus package that does not work, it's no secret why we have the Tea Party phenomenon in America. People are saying, and it's a very simple message, Republicans have been listening, Democrats have not. Quit spending so much and quit making government bigger. I don't need government running health care for me. I don't need them running the auto industry, and I don't need them running everything else.
So you don't.
Those are the talking points, Marcia, and I don't think it really has much to do with what's going on. I'll agree with Norm that if the unemployment rate in 2012 is greater than 7%, it's very likely that President Obama is going to be a one-term president. But to talk about this as a philosophical year, I think, is simply wrong. This particular result is a result of a very high unemployment rate. That cannot be argued with. The deficit spending for Iraq was no more honorable than that for the stimulus program. Finally, you don't get credit in American politics, particularly presidential American politics, for averting disasters. When Norm says the stimulus didn't work, what does that mean? It didn't bring unemployment down to 3%? No, it didn't. But without the stimulus, there are plenty of economists, even Republicans, who believe that the crisis would have been much deeper, much broader. You're not going to get credit for averting the crisis. You get credit for solving a crisis, and that is the task of the next 2 years.
Well, that's pretty good talking points on the other side as well, because we firmly believe that if we'd have instituted the right policies, we would have seen unemployment go the other direction instead of continuing to go up.
Okay, thank you very much for your call, Maria. I appreciate you waiting so long on the line and your supportive dialogue. Just a couple other things. We did have an email come in that said, when you review the sunshine reports between the Democrats and Republicans, most of the contributors to the Republican campaigns were PACs, fellow politicians and campaigns. Democrats, on the other hand, had many more individual contributors. In this person's view, the Democrats' campaigns were far more grassroots, yet they still lost. Any thoughts on this phenomenon?
Well, it doesn't necessarily speak highly of grassroots campaigns or individual contributions if you're going to judge these things in terms of who wins and who loses. There's nothing new there. I mean, I think
big
that
money.
You could have said that about any of the last 10 cycles in the state of Idaho.
Well, you have the Citizens United decision now from the Supreme Court.
It's going to make it worse, no question.
Well, I don't know which sunshine reports the person was looking at, but Raul Labrador, that was a grassroots campaign. He had a number of individual donors, and the vast majority of his donors were individual donors here in Idaho. Just as an example, Olson's campaign was heavily funded by the teachers' unions and offshoots of the teacher union. So you can point on both sides to plenty of instances of large dollar donations from corporate entities and unions and that kind of thing.
Do you think we need, the League of Women Voters has called on Congress to pass the Disclose Act, which would restore transparency in their views to elections by requiring disclosure of corporate and union spending in these elections?
Well, there's a little thing called the First Amendment and the right to speech, and that's what the Supreme Court spoke to in that decision. And what I find amusing is that folks on the Democrat side, not necessarily Mr. Rourke, but others have said, well, we got to stop the corporate interest. We can't let them put money in, and they want to close that off. But when you talk about what the unions are able to do, they go mum, they go quiet. So I just don't see how you're going to be able to do that, and I think it's a tremendously bad idea. What we need to have, and what we do have in Idaho, are good sunshine laws that disclose who is sending the message out, who is spending the money, so that folks know that.
I don't think the First Amendment stands in the way of disclosure of campaign contributions. That really was not an issue in the Citizens United case. I have become very cynical about the ability to ever control the amount of money flowing into the process. It is corrupting the process. And I don't think that union money is necessarily pure while corporate money is vile. What I do believe is that portion of the Citizens United decision that harkens back to this concept that a corporation is a person with free speech rights is a very bad decision. It cites very bad precedent. If we cannot control what a creature of the state like a corporation does, then we are losing more than just the right to control political contributions.
But let's not lose focus of the real issue here, and that is that for voters it's about the candidate's message and connecting with the voters, and there's no better example of that than the Labrador-Minnick race. Minnick outspent Labrador phenomenally, 5 times plus, and Labrador won by 10 points. So you can't explain that by money. It was the message, it was the voters, it was the mood of the electorate.
To a certain extent, in certain races, I think that's true. I'm not saying that big money will win every time. But if you give big money its head, if you have no regulation, you have no control, ways will be found to influence elections that go well beyond the ramifications of the Labrador race.
Well, we'll see in the future. As we wrap up, I wanted to take one look at a local race that had some historical import in Idaho, and that was with Cherie Buckner-Webb and Jim Moreland. Cherie Buckner-Webb was elected with 10,000 votes in District 19. She's the first African-American to be elected to the Idaho legislature. I know somebody who's not originally from here said to me, can that be? Can it be that she's really the first in the year 2010? But you know, we talked to her about it. We checked. As far as she knows, she is. It is historic.
Very. And as a practical matter, at the Owyhee on Tuesday night, when that issue came up, some people who had been around a long time, even longer than I, pondered that. And it struck us that that probably was correct. Certainly within our lifetimes, there had not been an African American.
Interesting, though, that you hadn't thought about it.
No, we hadn't thought about it at all.
No, and I would say the same thing about Raul Labrador having been born in Puerto Rico, and hopefully there'll be a day when we don't even worry about those kinds of things. This is the person that District 19 chose to be their representative, and that's really what matters.
And let me point out one final thing. This didn't come up on your program tonight, but I think it's very, very interesting, and again, I mean no disparagement of anyone. When Mike Crapo was elected to the United States Senate in 1998, he was the first Republican Mormon, first member of the LDS faith as a Republican to be elected to statewide office. We'd had Democrats.
Richard Stallings.
Well, Richard Stallings was a congressional, but we had John Evans, we had Joe Williams, we had J.D. Williams. When Congress meets and this delegation is sworn in, 3 of the 4 members of our congressional delegation will be LDS.
And that, in your view, shows progress?
What I'm suggesting here is that's something that sort of went under the wire. There was a time in this state when it was a strength to be LDS in the 2nd district, and it was death to be LDS in the 1st district.
Because Raul is like
LDS. Obviously that has changed. And the other thing, we didn't talk about it tonight, one of the factors I think that's been so important in this turnaround that has disfavored the Democrats is that we are losing an overwhelming percentage of the LDS vote. The Republicans have always historically done a little bit better, but today the amount of the vote that we're getting in the heavily LDS counties of the state is almost to the point where we can't make up elsewhere.
Because it was thought that it might help Keith Allred that he's LDS.
It was thought. At one point, people thought of that almost as a secret weapon. And it was an interesting thing to watch Vandersloot bring Mitt Romney in to tell LDS voters in eastern Idaho, this guy may be LDS, but he's a Democrat, don't vote for him. A new chapter in Idaho political history. We'll see how that plays out.
Well, and I certainly think that's a little too simplistic. When you lose an election and it looks like a Boise State football game score, there's more going on than just the LDS vote. With Mike Crapo, with Butch Otter, who obviously is not LDS, he's Catholic, across the board, Idahoans voted for the candidate that they thought was the best.
Well,
and in this case, they were Republican.
I think that's what he's saying, is that there used to be an anti-LDS sentiment, and that's slowly that's going away.
Now, you can't ascribe this election to a single issue or a single factor. Again, I think the largest factor is this tsunami of anti-administration votes, people who came out to register their protest with where we are in the economy today. That isn't to say there weren't other factors at play.
The margins were much bigger this year than they were in 2006. The results were the same, basically, on the constitutional officer side, but the margins were much bigger. And there's a number of reasons for that, and certainly the tsunami was a part of that.
Well, I hope that we can revisit in 2 years and talk more. You're already taking off your microphone. You must be ready to go.
Well, I keep thinking about that long road between here and Haley.
We thank you for driving from Haley very much. This has been a Dialogue Web Extra. I'm Marcia Franklin. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.